Metallic paints are used almost everywhere for miniature painting, especially in a fantasy setting. Whether it would be for your weapon-carrying models, or those fortunate enough to be wearing armour for that added defense. So it's nice to have a choice of colours to choose from. And following on from our Army Painter Washes video, we take a look at the Fanatic Metallic range and see what's sparkling and new. We've got a huge increase in colour choice from 8 to 18, and I can't wait to get started to try all of these out. I've got some good old test gobbling miniatures that I will respray with a black Vallejo primer before we begin. For the first part of the video, we're going to compare the existing old range of colours, the goblins on the Lego bricks, to the newer Fanatic range, the goblins on the circle bases. Rough Iron was first up, and I find this is a really nice base paint for other metallic colours to go over the top. It's got a nice dark colour to it, and it covers really well. For example, I gave this gobbo a copper layer over the top to brighten up the areas, and this would be good for things like statues on your scenery. Gunmetal is probably the most used metallic colour in my hobby. It's rare that I would work on a project without it. It's the darkest of the silver metals, and combined with a dark tone wash, it's a great basis for all sorts of weapons and armour on a variety of armies. Plate mail metal is slightly brighter than the previous gunmetal, and it's great if you want a miniature with a bit more punch to the overall look on the armour. I tend to use this colour as a form of a glaze, by thinning it down slightly and layering it over the top of a darker toned wash gunmetal, to give the armour a bit more shine. Shining silver is the brightest of the old range, and this was always handy when you want to highlight a metal colour. It's great for both silvers and golds on miniatures. It's probably one of the more thinner paints, and it's not the greatest as a base colour, but more than likely you wouldn't use it this way. You would have something like a gun or plate mail metal base coat because they're darker in colour, and then use this shining silver purely as a highlight. Now onto the warmer looking metallics, the golds. We have greedy gold next, and this colour is great if you want to paint that loot which your minis have stolen from whatever dwelling they are plundering. It's a nice shiny gold, and if you follow that up with a fleshy tone wash and a silver highlight, you'll be laughing all the way to your hideaway stash cave. Bright gold is probably one of the more weaker paints in terms of coverage, but I am layering it over black, so it's got a lot of work to do. Just like plate mail metal is good as a layer over gunmetal, bright gold is to greedy gold, and a thin layer over the top would give you a shinier look to your bling gold. The next two colours of Weapon Bronze and True Copper are great paints to have in your range at home. It's nice to have smaller accent colours on a miniature such as sword handles, helmet details or armour filigree to give more interest to a paint job. So rather than just having a silver or a gold on repeat throughout your collection, you can mix it up. Especially if you're working on a variety of armies and you want them to look a little bit different. As a comparison to the old range, I feel that the consistency is there and the colour matching is pretty good. The only small note I have here is that the old bright gold is saturated more with the yellow tone. And as for the brand new True Copper, it's just so much better than before in terms of colour and coverage. There are 4 new paints in the Fanatic range which have been created from the existing Warpaint Air range. So next up was to test them out to see how they compare to those. Tainted Gold. This is a nice variation of a brassy goldish looking colour. It feels like it's got a hint of green in there also, and I think this would suit evil armies really well. However, what would stand out really nicely on evil armies is Evil Chrome. This is such a great colour. It's bright and vibrant, and I can imagine fantasy Skaven players using this on their armies. Great colour, Army Painter. Well played. The last two from this batch are Gemstone Red and Glittering Green. Now, these paints have got a bit of glitz and glam about them. They would be good as a quick way of picking out those gems and other precious stones from your plundered treasure collection. And as consistency from the Air Paints range, they are spot on. However, I did notice that the new glittering green paint felt more liquidy than the others in the range, and it took 3 layers to cover, whilst the majority of the other paints only took a couple of coats. So it's my least favourite. And I just can't see a use for them besides picking out the odd gemstone. So my question of the day is, what projects could you see these 2 paints being used for? Let's have some useful and wacky ideas in the comments below. Now onto the brand new paint colours, and first off is Death Metal! This is like a really dark brassy colour. And much like our rough iron earlier, it would make a great base coat for other metallics to go on. Think things like Chaos Armor or Industrial Bases. Cobalt Metal is going to be a super useful paint, I reckon. And this is a really nice silver colour with a hint of blue in there. This paint would be perfect as a variation of silver on a miniature. So you could, for example, go for a gunmetal armor and a cobalt metal sword to make them look a bit different. Also, this would be great for things like Grey Knights in 40k or Dol Amroth in Middle-earth. A mithril is another bright silver. Probably not quite as bright as a chrome or an aluminium from the Vallejo range if you have used those paints before, but it would be good enough to highlight your arboured miniatures with. So if you run out of shining silver, then at least you have this paint as a good backup. Now to my absolute favourite new colour, True Brass. This is a fantastically light coloured brass, and it is excellent for highlighting those warmer tone metals like gold, copper and bronze. Before, in the Dark Ages, I used to mix gold and silver together to get this colour, but now it's in a bottle of its own. Bonza. Another new favourite of mine is Red Copper. It's just a lovely warm-toned coloured metallic paint, and I can see this being used on a plethora of fantasy miniatures. Especially if you don't want to have that repetition of things being gold or just bronze, but you are looking for that bit of variation. Lastly but not least is Dark Emerald. It's like a dull greenish gold paint, however it is a nice dark metallic colour. I think all sorts of evil-based armies would suit this perfectly, and I'll look forward to using all of these wonderful colours in future tutorials for the channel. Hopefully this will give you a good introductory into the Fanatic Metallics by Army Painter, and I'll also be going through all of the effects paints in the range on a series of videos for the channel. To not miss out on those, prod that subscribe button to follow along for more videos.